Hello YouTube. We're making progress and we're going to make a step towards getting the vehicle to move under its own power. And today's project is to put a torque converter into the motor. So that means we need the torque converter bolted to the flex plate, we need the cooler bolted to the transmission, and we need fluid in the transmission. So that's what we're going to do in this video. This torque converter was mailed to me maybe 15 years ago. And it was mailed to my old house. I have kept it stored in a dry place, so let's hope that it's not all rusted up and not usable. Clean and crisp. Some instructions. And a torque converter. No worse for wear. Let's see if we can get the cap off. We have no rust. A little sticky and gooey, but no rust, so I'm ready to put it in. There is one problem. We have to pull the motor first. Let's start at the beginning by draining the radiator. Out comes the fans. Time to remove the core support and radiator. Over to the workbench. Next we are going to take the carburetor off. And there shouldn't be any fuel here because I ran it out of fuel before we started this, but just in case we'll put the paper towel there. And off it comes. And off comes the carburetor. Out she pops. The plan is to gently set the transmission onto the table and then balance the motor out because it's not going to have the weight of the transmission. Then unbolt the transmission and put our torque converter in. Now the excitement comes. Let's see if we can separate this without the motor flipping on us. We have the torque converter up and on the flex plate. There's two different sets of holes on the flex plate, and this torque converter also has two different holes. The outside holes of the torque converter line up with this set of holes in the flex plate. So that's where we'll bolt it up, we'll mark it, so that when we're underneath the car, we know which holes to use. We're ready to install the torque converter into the transmission. And TCI has directions on how to do that. And their step number 3 is when installing the torque converter into the transmission, please pour approximately 1 quart of ATF into the converter before installing into the transmission seal, front pump bushing, and converter neck. So what I'm going to do is take and pour about a quart of transmission fluid into this cup. That's about a quart. And this is ATF. This is Dextron ATF Pure Synthetic. I guess you can't pour it that fast. We've got the converter as full as I trust to fill it without spilling, trying to put it into the transmission. And now we're going to try to slide it into the front of the transmission. We want to put some ATF on these gears here. And we want to put some on the seal. And we want to put some on the snout. And now we're going to try to slide this on the shaft. And it should go in 2 different steps. That's 1. There we go. This is an important step. What we do is take a straight edge and put it across the flange of the transmission. Take another straight edge and measure the distance between the surface of the torque converter and your straight edge, and we have 5/8 of an inch. Then we take the straight edge and put it on our flex plate and measure to the surface of the engine, and we have 7/8 of an inch. So there's a 1/4 inch difference, and that's good because that means that, oh wait a minute, that's wrong. Is there possibly another notch that is supposed to go in? Yep. So this is very important. What you do is take a straight edge and lay it across the surface of the flange of the transmission and measure the distance from the torque converter to your straight edge, and we have 1 1/8 inches. And then we take and we measure, take that straight edge and lay it across the surface of our flex plate, and we go to the surface of the motor, and we have 7/8 of an inch. So this does not recess as far in as what the torque converter does. There's going to be a space between the two, so we can now bolt the transmission to the engine. What I did is leveled the motor out level with the transmission so that I can push it together, and there shouldn't be any resistance. It should just go together like so. And we'll put a nut, a bolt in there. The best torque spec I could find was 25 foot-pounds on the bell housing bolts. And that one's good. And that one's good. What we have to check is make sure there is play between the torque converter and the flex plate. All right, if we've done this right, there should be about that much play between the torque converter and the flex plate. Now this is actually a little much, and what I might do is put a washer in between the flex plate and the torque converter just to eat up some of that space, because we don't want the pump to be only partially engaged. We only want this to move about 1/8 of an inch. All right, we have a torque converter here which rotates freely. We had the bolt hole in the flex plate that we marked when we had it apart. What we want to do is take a bolt and feed it from the back side, because there's not much room between the flex plate and the bolt. If we tried putting a washer behind that head, it would hit the block. We'll put a washer on the end of this to give us a little less space between the torque converter and the flex plate. You only want about 1/8 of an inch play. And the bolt slides through. We'll put another washer, a lock washer. We'll put a drop of blue Loctite on the nut and thread that on. And now what we got to do is turn the motor over to get to the next set. Alright, this is the 3rd time around, and we'll tighten these bolts up pretty tight this time around. One more pull. Alright. We'll turn it over until we get to the next bolt. And tighten it up. With the torque converter bolted to the flex plate and the bell housing bolted to the engine, we're ready to put it back in the car. And the first thing we got to do is jack it up far enough to get it off the table. And move it away from the table. And just like that, we have a loaded bullet in the vehicle. TCI instructions, step 8, states, finish the installation of the transmission. When finished, install 4 quarts of ATF in the transmission. Start the engine and immediately add 2 more quarts. So what I'm going to do is add what we couldn't get into the torque converter and put 4 quarts in. 4 of these.
That's 3.
Okay.
Well, if you count the one that you put in the torque converter and the half of the one that was left.
I'm not counting that very first one.
That's 2.
That's 3?
That's 3.
Four. Start the engine and immediately add 2 more.
Right.
So the 3rd one from you is the fuel pump. Let me check for leaks. Okay, pump it twice.
What? No, what about water?
No.
Okay.
Push the start button. Then we're going to start it again. Oh, we got transmission fluid on the ground here. Where's it coming from?
Oh, yeah, it's really hot.
All right, go ahead. Oh yeah. I think it came out of the hose. On further examination, what we found was we had a loose line that was spraying transmission fluid all over the place. And this is what it looks like. So the fitting that's leaking is that top fitting there. And I think it's actually leaking out of the hose part of the fitting. What we're going to have to do is take that hose out of there and redo it. It's nice and hot up in there right now. I'm not putting my hand up in there. We're going to have to do this another day. This line runs from the side of the transmission down underneath the floorboards, on top of the cross member, and through some pass-through ports to the cooler for the transmission. TCI has a real nice write-up on how to tell whether the transmission is full or not. And essentially what you're supposed to do is check the transmission when it's hot, like 180 degrees. But they do give you some guidance when it's only at room temperature. Reading from the instructions, it says, if the fluid feels cool, about room temperature, the level should be between the two dimples below the add mark. Dimples are only on some models. And then they have a picture. And they're saying when cool, it should be like a ½ inch below the add mark. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to add fluid while the motor's running in park with cold fluid until we get to within ½ inch of the mark on the dipstick. Pump it! Well, I can't get a good reading. I'm going to have to try again a little later. But the fluid appears to be right at the bottom of the add mark on this side. But on this side, you really can't tell. And it's because the tube is so full of oil that I can't get a good reading out of the dipstick. So we're going to wait a little bit, then we'll crank it up and we'll take a reading, and the tube should be dry. Okay, my wife is going to start it back up. We're going to see if we can get a level on this thing. Okay, it came up reading the same thing again. It's clearly, there's fluid to there, but not beyond. That's the add fill. And on this side, you really can't tell, but it looks like it was right there. So that's right in the same spot. So if anything, we're a little overfull. Well, I believe we've accomplished what we set out to do. We put a torque converter behind this 454, which now connects it to its Turbo 400. If you enjoyed this video, there'll be more.